In this section, I would talk about the best practices which help you improvise your programming techniques. Best practices: exception handling. Do not use exception handling to control program flow. Use exception handling to tackle abnormal conditions or situations in your application. Use exception handling generously, as very little overhead is imposed by exception handling mechanism, unless an exception occurs. Always use the finally block to release the resources to prevent resource leaks, because finally blocks gets executed irrespective of an exception. In other words, I can say that the execution of a finally block is guaranteed, until and unless there is an abnormal termination of the JVM. Handle exceptions locally wherever possible. And it's also important to notify the calling method about the exceptions that are likely to occur in a given method. To do this, you may use the throws clause. While defining user-defined exceptions, ensure that they could convey the complete information. Use user-defined exceptions to handle abnormal business condition failures. Keep different exceptions for each error condition to have clarity about different causes of an error. In other words, it means one should not handle exceptions generically. It's a good practice to have the word exception at the end of the class name defining user-defined exceptions. This helps the programmer to differentiate the user-defined exception classes from normal classes. Always keep the exceptions in the order of most specific to the least specific, which in turn helps in handling the specific exception before it is moved to the generic catch block. Best practices for assertions. Usage of assertions in itself is a best practice. Use assertions for private arguments only. Do not use them for public arguments. It is good to place an assertion in code where execution should never reach. Since assertions are generally not enabled, do not use them to do anything your program may require for proper execution. This implies that assertions are only used at program debugging stage. They cannot be used at the deployment stages, that is, after the testing is done.